Land is important in non-Aboriginal Australia. It's like an obsession in the art and literature. It's a sign. When European looks at country and sees landscape, it is a sign saying nature. But what is seen is not country, it's landscape. It works as a myth to imagine that modern Australia is a unified people, as if the landscape is what they have in common, what unites all of us.
Back in December last year, I got a phone call informed me that a registered site in my traditional country, which is up in the Midwest, in Widi country, was deregistered.
Back in 2009, when the Liberal government got re-elected, they set up an organisation called the Industry Working Group, which looked at a number of pieces of legislation which were seen to be an impediment to development in Western Australia. And one of those was the Aboriginal Heritage Act. Over the last couple of years, 3 years, the department has been slowly removing sites from the register.
So I became part of a core group of four co-founders of the Aboriginal Heritage Action Alliance, and we've been working ever since, I suppose, January, February this year. The site in particular for me was a serpent mythology site with what we call the Bimara or Bimara, and the site was deregistered at the request of, I suppose, the influence of the resource sector, and since then we've become aware of 30 other sites of similar deregistration, but also there's been some 2,000 to 3,000 which have not appeared on the registry and or have had their protection diminished in some way. So we've really uncovered the tip of the iceberg, I suppose.
I'm one of the co-founders for the Aboriginal Heritage Action Alliance, and what we're about is trying to scrap amendments to the Aboriginal Heritage Act which are currently in Parliament. The diminishment of heritage protection and also community closures, and in recent weeks and months, if you're not aware, there's also been another piece of legislation put through the WA government regarding anti-protest laws and legislation. The National Party and the Liberal Party of Western Australia, in conjunction with the Federal Liberal Party, have a distinct strategy to get rid of Aboriginal people off country in WA, to access minerals, to access our country, and to pay their greedy pockets of the mineral and resource sector in those buildings down there.
So I'm an Australian archaeologist, and I'm the managing director of a private company called Archaeos, and so we do cultural heritage work mostly in Western Australia but also in other parts of the country. And I'm very deeply concerned about the rapid change from places being sites under that Act until almost nothing, well, only 6% of places now being sites under that Act.
We've now come up with around about 3,000 plus sites that have been deregistered. And the government now really basically wants to emasculate what's left of the Heritage Act by completely changing many of the aspects, the way we deal with Aboriginal heritage in Western Australia. They set in place a train of amendments, and those amendments give executive power to an individual in the department. Indigenous people don't have control over their sites, and those sites are then controlled merely by a bureaucrat within the Department of Indigenous Affairs.
As the James Price Point development for the Woodside Browse Basin gas processing plant, as that was going through, these new criteria came out. There's been other reports to show that there's a link and documents which would tend to support that.
You find it quite quite ludicrous with the new amendments and the new criteria. One in particular regarding a site now has to have evidence of religious activity. We think that's nonsensical. We think it's a Western concept. It's not that these sites have an altar and you're there each Sunday and praying in a Western Christian sense. So we think the new criteria and the process combine to diminish sites to pave the way for mining.
The Pilbara economy provides some of the state's largest export revenue earners: iron ore and liquefied natural gas. The Burrup Strategic Industrial Area is ideally located in the Pilbara to process and export the region's gas reserves. Connected by the Dampier Port and deepwater shipping lanes, major roads, the Dampier to Bunbury gas pipeline, process water and brine return pipelines and power services, the Burrup Strategic Industrial Area is a fully functioning industrial estate.
The Burrup holds great importance for the local Aboriginal groups. It's got vast importance for them, spiritually and ceremonially and mythologically. A number of years ago, the traditional owner groups decided that they wanted to make a whole of Burrup site to capture the importance and significance of that place under 5B of the Aboriginal Heritage Act. And that's the one that's been taken off the register. So that's one of the 37 places that we're now awaiting a redecision about whether it is and it isn't a site under the Act. It's a marvel of artistic creation and ingenuity. It's the biggest rock art province in the world. On the Burrup, there are engravings of faces which are geometric in design. They're known as archaic faces. They're some of the earliest, if not the earliest, depictions of the human face anywhere in the world. There are clearly very similar faces that occur out in the Western Desert, and then they also occur in Central Australia, which is showing that there are links, superhighways. We're dealing with super nomads, people who had interactions with other groups across, the inland continent, from the Burrup Peninsula all the way through into Central Australia. So they're a very key symbol of early populations in Australia. Very early, they're 40,000, possibly 50,000 years old. It's an amazing place.
We actually see on the Burrup carvings that aren't retained anywhere else because of the hardness of the rock. It's granophyre, it doesn't exfoliate, it means it loses its face. So the carvings remain. Any carving done on any other rock would only last about 3,000 years. Here, the rocks in situ on the Burrup are about 5 million years old. So if you carved on them, the carving's going to stay. And so we've actually got a chronology of human endeavour from the start of Aboriginal inhabitation in Australia to the modern day. And we can actually see climatic changes, we can see animals that have gone extinct, invasive species being recorded. It's actually the best literary example of what humanity did for the last 30 to 40,000 years, which doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet. It actually records an ice maximum or an ice age.
Parts of it are now a national park, and it's on the National Estate List, which is a good thing, but it would be great to see it on the World Heritage List.
We'd like to see the Act rewritten to ensure that Aboriginal people are fully involved at all level of consultation, engagement, if you like, in the rewriting of that Act.
We can have a Fremantle prison, which is completely heritage listed. It's only 200 years old, and it gets absolute protection under the Heritage Act. You damage it, you're fined $1 million, and yet we have the world's earliest faces on the planet, carved by Indigenous people 30 to 40,000 years ago, and it doesn't have any protection. And if you damage it, it's only $25,000 fine. It makes a mockery of how we deal with heritage in this nation.
It's like there's this strange compulsion to repeat the initial invasion of the land, this continuing return of the explorer in different outfits, mapping, naming, possessing, photographing, whereas for us, country is life. There's a particular local relationship with specific country which is inseparable from a people's identity and tradition, family and culture. The trauma of the invasion has to be continually repeated. I think this is what they call progress.